Hey there, this is Perplexed22, head of community at OrdinalsBot, and today we're going to be talking about rare Satoshis and how you can inscribe onto those rare Satoshis using OrdinalsBot.com. If you're not familiar, a Satoshi is the smallest unit of Bitcoin, which is equivalent to 100 millionth of one single Bitcoin. Full Bitcoin can be split into smaller units of these Satoshis to facilitate even smaller transactions, which is super helpful in Bitcoin's accessibility, particularly with microtransactions in either developing nations, gaming, and stuff like that. The Satoshi is, of course, named after the founder of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you can now actually inscribe onto rare Satoshis using OrdinalsBot.com. So what is a rare Satoshi? How is it identified? And why should you care? Well, Satoshis are identified inside a block by their transaction outputs. So basically the particular type of transaction that it was involved with. And there were various types of transactions where Satoshis were used, whether that's Satoshi sending them to Hal Finney or Laszlo paying for the pizzas that he bought back in the day for those Bitcoin. The way that we currently track rarity index for Satoshis is with something called the Rodarmor Rarity Index. Now, if you're familiar with ordinals at all, you'll know that Casey Rodarmor is the inventor of ordinal theory and came up with 6 different categories that identify the rarity of Satoshis. And those are common Satoshis, uncommon Satoshis, rare sats, epic, legendary, and mythic. And I'll break each one of these down here for you. I'm basically referencing a Medium article that we wrote. So if you'd like to read about all of this yourself, do go check out our Medium profile. Just search for OrdinalsBot on medium.com and you'll find this particular article. Common Satoshi is basically, it might not carry the same unique attributes as some other categories. They are the stable workhorse of the Bitcoin network. They are very common. They're used for everyday stuff like buying a cup of coffee, making online purchases, all that good stuff. And they're the most common Satoshi that we have. Uncommon Satoshis is actually the very first Satoshi of every Bitcoin block. So in the world of Bitcoin mining, a block is added to the blockchain about every 10 minutes. And if you've watched any of my other walkthrough videos, you're very familiar with this because I'm always telling you whenever you're submitting a transaction, it takes 10 minutes to process. And so you kind of have to walk away from the screen and wait for it to process. The first Satoshi that's mined within each one of those new blocks is referred to as an uncommon Satoshi. A rare Satoshi, this category includes the first Satoshi of every difficulty adjustment period, which happens every 2016 blocks or roughly every 2 weeks. So by comparison, an uncommon Satoshi happens every 10 minutes. A rare Satoshi happens every 2 weeks-ish because every 2 weeks, the difficulty mining of the Bitcoin is adjusted. And the very first Satoshi there, again, is called a rare Satoshi. An epic Satoshi, we're moving up the scale in terms of rarity. It signifies the very first Satoshi of each halving, an event that occurs every 210,000 blocks or approximately every 4 years. So now we went from 10 minutes to 2 weeks, all the way up to 4 years. And these are obviously very rare. The next category is called legendary Satoshis. These are the first Satoshis of each cycle. Casey called every cycle that we're referring to here as every 6 halvings, where the difficulty adjustment and the halving actually coincide. So that happens very rarely. And now we're going to move up even one last level to mythic. This is the initial Satoshi of the Genesis block, which is the very first Satoshi that was ever brought into existence. It's actually believed to be unspendable and unattainable. So this mythic Satoshi is held by Satoshi Nakamoto, and as far as we know, probably will never be in circulation. So it is the rarest Satoshi that there is. I referenced earlier that there were different types of Satoshis based off of transactions that happen around those Satoshis, and you can see the current categories of rare sats. I'll show you this exact same box, but on the OrdinalsBot website here in just a moment so that you can see how you can inscribe onto each one of these, but you can see these categories listed out here, including some of the ones that we just discussed. Outside of the Rodarmor index that we just talked through, there are various rarity sats that are tied to those specific transactions, such as pizza sats. These pizza sats were actually associated with, like I mentioned, one of the most significant events of early Bitcoin history, which is when Laszlo purchased 2 large pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin in 2010. So any Satoshis that were a part of this particular transactions are labeled as pizza Satoshis. You can inscribe your particular ordinals onto these. In fact, one of the most famous, I would say, ordinal collections out there right now is the Pizza Ninjas, which is run by Trevor Owens and crew. And they're all inscribed on pizza sats themselves. Palindrome sats are, again, another form of rare Satoshi. The term palindrome denotes a sequence of characters that reads the same forward and backwards. In the context of Satoshis, then, palindrome numbers are recognized from their numerical symmetry. For instance, the number 27081111186 8072 is a palindrome because you can read it the exact same whether you start from the left or from the right. I actually got to see some of these palindrome Satoshis in use by the Billy Rusty Fusion project, which actually generated a unique piece of art based on the Satoshi number. When you got into palindrome numbers, these numbers were so beautiful and symmetrical that it would generate an ordinal that was equally stunning. So that rarity has a really neat way of playing itself out whenever we're doing really cool inscriptions with things like the Fusion Mint. A block 9 sat refers to the Satoshi that were a part of the very first block ever mined on the Bitcoin blockchain. So Satoshi Nakamoto, the pseudonymous creator of Bitcoin, mined this block back in January of 2009, and thereby a block 9 sat is a foundational Satoshi, basically set the entire Bitcoin network in motion. Block 78 sats, by comparison, were actually, as I mentioned earlier in the video, they were mined from the inaugural block by Hal Finney, who is the second miner after Satoshi Nakamoto. And again, these Satoshis mark a very pivotal milestone in Bitcoin's evolution. If you're familiar with the famous tweet by Hal Finney running Bitcoin, he's the guy who mined these particular block 78 sats. And if you're not familiar with Hal Finney, I highly encourage you to go do a little research and figure out why he's such a big deal to the Bitcoin blockchain. Vintage Satoshis, this is a category that describes Satoshis which originated from the earliest 10,000 blocks on Bitcoin, which is basically an era that laid the ground for Bitcoin's eventual ascent to what it is today. Then we also have the first transaction or Nakamoto Satoshis. The Nakamoto Satoshis were actually mined by Satoshi, so not just the first one, but any Satoshis that are known to be mined by Satoshi are called Nakamoto. And then the first transaction Satoshis, these Satoshis were actually used in a transaction between Satoshi himself and Hal Finney on January 12th, 2009, in block 170. So obviously this is the very first time that Bitcoin was sent between individuals, making these Satoshis pretty rare. Why do we care about all of this? Well, rare sats are actually starting to pick up. If you're paying attention to crypto Twitter or ordinal news in general, you'll notice that rare Satoshis are starting to become an investment class of their own because of the rarity and the perceived value behind them. There's also the utility, like I mentioned, of projects like Fusion, where we generate art based off of the Satoshi number. So there's lots of different applications, and I believe that we're just on the cusp of seeing how creative people can be with these particular rare Satoshis. So I'm going to pop over to OrdinalsBot.com real quick and give you guys a look at what it looks like to actually inscribe your files onto rare Satoshis using OrdinalsBot. So let's do that. All right, here we are on OrdinalsBot.com, and we are going to take a look at actually inscribing onto those rare Satoshis that I mentioned. So before we can take a look at the Satoshis that are available, we actually have to have a file to inscribe. If you'd like to take a look at a walkthrough that actually takes you through the entire process of inscribing, check out our YouTube channel under walkthrough playlist. I've got an entire walkthrough just for you on how to inscribe an ordinal. So we'll just blaze through this really quickly. We'll do a picture of how just for history's sake. All right, and so if you scroll down here, you can see this little block of text and different types of Satoshis. So this is the section of OrdinalsBot where you can choose the Satoshi type you'd like to inscribe on. If you have particular questions about each one of these, like that I didn't break down, you can click on what is this, and we'll give you a little breakdown of each one. One Satoshi that we actually just recently added that I didn't mention as I was breaking down each individual sat, a couple actually. So we have a JPEG sat, which was the first image for Bitcoin trade. Those Satoshis you can inscribe there. We also have Hitman sat, which this is the transaction that was supposedly Ross Ulbricht paying for an assassin on the black market. We have Black Satoshis, which is the last Satoshi of each block. All of the other blocks that we talked about, the different types of Satoshis. Once you upload your ordinal file to inscribe, you can choose to optimize it, which lowers the file size, add the metadata. If you have a parent child you'd like to upload, that's fine. You can do that there. Select the particular sat that you want to purchase. If you notice down here at the bottom, there's the total cost to inscribe the file that I've added plus the Satoshi cost. And this varies depending on basically how rare the Satoshi is. You can see that that price adjusts as we click on each one. There were a lot more pizza sats than other sats. And also keep in mind the fees to inscribe fluctuate based off of where the network is currently sitting at. I think because of various things happening on the network, we're at a pretty high to inscribe cost right now. So that'll update in real time, as well as the cost of the actual special Satoshi's fee. You can see that in this line right here. So there you have it. There's a quick look at rare Satoshis, how they work, and how you can inscribe onto them using OrdinalsBot. Like I mentioned, if you'd like to read all about these rare Satoshis, we did a deep dive article on our Medium account. Just look at OrdinalsBot on Medium and you can look through that entire article instead of listening to me talk through it. I appreciate you watching through this little tutorial about rare Satoshis. If you're watching this video on X, do please make sure and check out our YouTube channel. We've got walkthrough videos for almost everything that you can do on OrdinalsBot, as well as a weekly summary video playlist that I have that gives you all the updates for OrdinalsBot and keep you current on everything that's going on. Thanks so much for watching. This is Perplexed 22. I'll see you next time.